Hello and very good morning to all of you. Welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Today we are going to have a discussion on the newspaper of the Hindu, that is today 22nd November 2023. Now today when you look at the number of articles that we have, you'll see that there are a lot of articles today which have in one way or the other a relation to environment and ecology. And this is because of a few reports that have been published recently, and also because of the fact that there is the upcoming conference of parties that is supposed to happen in Dubai. So because of these reasons we see that this has been in the news. Plus there is one more article. So when we look at all these articles that we have taken for detailed analysis, we have an article on your editorial page that is alarming countdown. Then after that, recognizing the impact of climate change on health, which is a very important topic for your mains examination. And then the OECD report on climate finance. So these are three topics that we have, plus one more topic that, if you see here, topic number 5, which is also related to the problem that we are facing and the kind of climate change that we are looking at. The temperature increase, the global average temperature increase that we are right now looking towards. So all these are there, and then there is one more topic, and this is related to coal. And apart from that, we'll be discussing one key important area from the perspective of international relations. So these are the areas that we have taken for detailed analysis. Now apart from that, when we are looking at all the other articles, there are three small articles also that we have taken. One is related to cloud seeding that is being proposed for Mumbai. Then there is something which is called as the SATHEE portal. And what is this SATHEE portal that has been introduced by the government? We'll try to understand that. And then finally, something related to a report where the finance ministry is saying that inflation is something which still remains a key risk to growth. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss in today's class. Now, the very first article that we have is alarming countdown. Now, this is an article which basically is talking about how all the nations, they need to strive and ensure that they strive for net zero carbon emission. Now this is something that has been coming back again and again, that it's not only about the reduction that we can do to carbon dioxide emissions, but we have to look at net zero emissions. So even India has pledged that India will be looking towards net zero emissions by 2070. Similarly, other countries also have pledged towards it. And at the same time, we see that a lot of climate advocates always have been saying that it's not enough just to reduce. We have to go back to zero. We have to go back to the levels of the pre-industrial levels if we want to survive. Because now the kinds of implications that we are looking at, they are going to be enormous, and the world needs to take very immediate steps and very extreme steps to ensure that we don't get to a certain situation like that. So that is basically what we are discussing here in this particular article. So this article is being discussed here in the context of a new report that was published by the UN, and the name of the report itself is Broken Record. And obviously for a reason why it has been named as Broken Record, because what we have understood is that over a period of time, although there are a lot of promises, there are a lot of pledges and everything that a lot of countries talk about, whether these are countries from the developed worlds or the developing worlds, but when we look at the actual outcome of all these promises, we see that we are nowhere around keeping up with those promises, and that is what's causing the harm to the earth, and it is going to cause a lot of catastrophe in the coming days and coming years. So that's why this is a new report that has been published, which basically is talking about all the data points with regards to what's happening currently and where we are headed. So for example, when you look at some of the key takeaways that we are looking at from the perspective of this article, we see that this article has been talking about a very key point, and this is why we need to keep below 1.5 degrees Celsius, that the average global rise in temperature with regards to the pre-industrial levels should not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. And when we are looking at 2023 alone, what we see is that the global average temperatures exceeded at least for 80, there were at least 86 days in total where we saw that there was a rise above 1.5 degrees Celsius already. And the way we are going, it's not going to be very easy for us to keep up with all the records that we are looking at, and it's going to be very difficult for us in the coming days, because we'll see that all the problems associated with climate change, they will start to aggravate. And it has been projected in this report that a temperature rise of 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius by the end of century uh, is unavoidable if we continue in the same trajectory. And it's for us to keep it well below 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have to start taking very extreme steps. So for example, what we see is that if we want to stay within the 2 degrees Celsius limit, then the emissions have to be cut by at least 28% by 2030, and for 1.5% target, a reduction of 42% is necessary. So we'll have to reduce our emissions by 42%, then only it is possible for us that we'll be able to get to these levels, or the required levels of keeping the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But when we look at the problems, we see that the problems and the data, when you look at the data with regards to what's happening here, you will see that we are not at all in any way, we are not going at a pace where we will be able to reach these targets. For example, we see that every year the emissions must decrease by 8.7% every year if we want to get to those targets and achieve the temperature level of below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But we are not at all there, because when we are looking at, for example, the carbon emissions that happened last year, alright, when you are looking at last year, it actually increased by 1.2%. The total emissions that was done last year, it increased by 1.2%. Here we are looking at a decrease of 8.7% per annum, whereas we are looking at an increase of 1.2%. Not only that, the emissions had reduced during the pandemic time. In 2020 and 21, we saw that the emissions had reduced, obviously because a lot of industrial activities had also slowed down, the economy is also slowed down, and because of that we saw that the emission levels also came down. But what we are observing today is that world is almost about to reach the same levels that we had in 2019. So it's not that we are making any mark here when it comes to this particular scenario, because when we are looking at the situations, and that is basically what has been said here, that there is a rebound that is also happening. It is what the report is saying, that there is a rebound in emissions that's happening post pandemic. So overall, what we understand is that this is becoming a big challenge for us, because there is no you can say hard steps that are being taken by any country whatsoever, and that's why we are looking at these kind of scenarios. And overall, we'll see that this will become a bigger challenge as we go off. Now, one more thing that has been pointed out in this particular article is about, or article that has been taken from the report, and it is where they are talking about the responsibility of the wealthier nations. The wealthier nations, and how they have to take steps in a manner that they could not only help themselves and make sure that their targets are being met, but at the same time also help the developing world, also help the developing world or the underdeveloped world also to get to their specific targets. So that's why it becomes much more important for these nations, because they have the resources, they have the kind of money that is required to be invested in order to gain all these things and in order to get to the required targets. So that's why it has also pointed out about how exactly these countries also have to take care of all the responsibilities. But unfortunately, this is where we see that the things have been very different, because when you look at any COP conferences that happen every year, this year also it is just about to happen in the next week itself, you will see that again the same blame game will happen, that all the developing countries like India, or even economies like China, etc., South Africa, all these will come together and say that, look, we only started emitting carbon dioxide and all the other greenhouse gases only maybe a few decades back. Look at what you have been doing. This will be what the charge from our side would be to the developed world, that you have been doing this for like 300 years and we just started doing it for 40 years, and you are putting pressure on us saying that we should stop emitting. We cannot. In order for us to stop emitting, we'll first have to get to that peak and start to come down from there. But we still aren't there where we can start coming down, and this is where we need the help. But when we are being asked to stop, when we are being asked to look at the emission levels and decrease the emission levels, it's not even possible for the developing world to do that. So the onus lies on you, the developed world, the rich economies, to do that. On the other hand, the rich economies will simply say that, look, where we are right now, we are not emitting. These are countries like India and China who are emitting, so we are not responsible, it's their responsibility. So in this manner, every year the story is same, the script is almost the same. There are small changes that happen, just like how it happens in our movie industries also, that there will be small changes in the script. Same will happen here also, that there will be small changes in the script, but eventually everyone will blame everyone else and they'll happily come back after the conference. And I don't want to be so negative, but this is what the situation of all these conferences have been. So for example, one of the most landmark conferences that we often talk about is the Paris Climate Summit of 2015, where a lot of targets were put, and targets were basically put for 2030. And all these targets and all these data that we are looking at, all these data had its source, has its origin in the 2015 Paris Climate Summit. And everyone, all the nations, almost 195 nations came together and they pledged that we are going to fight together against climate change. But all the pledges, all the targets, all these things were non-binding in nature, meaning that there is nothing that is going to happen to you if you don't do anything. And that's what we saw in the US, that the government of US pledged a lot of things in 2015. In 2016, the government changed, and the new government that came in with Donald Trump as the head, he simply said that I don't believe in climate change, so I'm not going to do anything with regards to whatever we had pledged. Now, this is not only about one leader in the US, this is something that is a cycle. And you go back in history, you go back to 1972 Stockholm Conference, and ever since then, whatever has been happening, you'll find that there will be one leader in the US who comes and says that I'm going to fight against climate change. Then the next government comes and says that we are not going to do anything. Then the next government again comes back, says that we are going to fight against climate change. And this has been a cycle. So blaming just one leader would also be wrong, because this is how they always have been behaving. This is what the strategy perhaps has been from their side. So unfortunately, the wealthier nations who need to take the charge, they actually aren't taking the charge, and this is what's hurting our fight against climate change. We see that countries like India have been trying their best. We have been trying to increase our installed capacity as much as possible for us with the limited amount of resources that we have, but we have been doing that. Even countries like China have been doing very well in these kind of scenarios, but have been trying very well, I would say. But at the same time, we see that a more relaxed approach has been taken by many of the richer economies. So that is where we need to understand these kind of scenarios, that how this becomes very, very crucial for us to understand that what kind of scenarios it could cause. Now, talking about another article, and this is also an article which is more or less on the same lines, and again we are talking about climate change only, but we are talking about an impact on climate change. We often have been talking about the extreme weather conditions and all these things that will happen because of climate change, the melting of glaciers and melting of polar ice caps, increase in temperature and all these things. But we need to essentially understand the kind of impact it is going to have on us, the kind of impact it is already having on us. We not just realizing it, that it's because of climate change that these kind of issues have been aggravating. So for us to also realize the problem with regards to climate change on health, is something which is very, very essential. Now, when it comes to the impact of climate change on health, this article, a wonderful article, wonderfully written article, it talks about not only the issues that climate change will have, but at the same time, what are the issues that India would see, and what are the things that we need to do. What are the kinds of actions that we need to take if at all we want to fight these kind of scenarios that are going to become a reality very soon. So then in that case, it basically talks about all these issues, and that is basically what the context of this article is, that it talks about the impact of climate change, talks about the impact of climate change on India's health as the country is preparing for the upcoming COP28. So that's why in this context it becomes very, very important for us to understand what's going to happen, or what are the basic problems that we can have because of climate change. Now, when it comes to climate change, there are some problems that are direct, they are directly related to climate change, and then there are certain issues which are not directly related but indirectly related to climate change. So that's why we need to understand both the aspects of the direct impacts and the aspects of the indirect impacts. So both of them we have to understand, the impact that it will have on physical health, and also the impact that will have on mental health, the impact that will have on communicable infections or diseases, and also the impact that will have on non-communicable diseases. So we need to have a problem, we have to understand all these issues. So first and foremost, when it comes to this particular article, it basically talks about all these issues what we probably will be facing. So first and foremost, it talks about the vulnerability of India's health system, that how exactly we see that right now, even with not a lot of pressure being put by climate change right now, we know that our health systems still need a lot of improvement. We need to work more on infrastructure, and we need to have a solid infrastructure to fight back these kind of issues. So right now we see that there are all these issues that we have, and we know about, largely we basically are talking about the infrastructural issues that we have in India. So we know that when it comes to the health infrastructure, there is a lot of work that is needed. The governments, both at the center and the state levels, have been trying their best to ensure that the health facilities are better, but it needs a lot of improvement and a lot of work. So that is one problem. Now, when it comes to the temperature rise, the article basically has been highlighting that if the temperatures start rising by 2 degrees Celsius, there would be a lot of parts of the country that could potentially become uninhabitable. And that's why this is something that has to be understood, because the extreme weather conditions will start to increase. Apart from that, there will be certain vulnerabilities that will happen to the very fragile ecosystems. The fragile ecosystems will be the first ones to be hit, and because of that we might see a lot of issues. So for example, we might see a lot of issues especially with the coastal areas. We might see a lot of issues with the coastal areas, and coastal areas might be the ones that will see a lot of issues. At the same time, we'll see that it will basically lead to both communicable and non-communicable diseases, both increasing, because we'll see that it will not only be these diseases, because climate change will be able to increase all the impacts that we have because of these diseases. So for example, let's say we'll see more of the growth of pathogens and the disease causing organisms. So we'll see that there will be a rise in pathogen number, there would be a rise in pathogen number and the vectors. Now what do we mean by vectors? Vectors basically are the carriers of diseases, correct? So the carriers of diseases would also increase. So for example, let's say mosquitoes. Now if you see today, and I'm not even saying that this is a potentially something that could happen, or this would happen, or that would happen. If you have been to the Himalayan areas, or if you live in Himalayan areas, you might already have started seeing this, where you'll see that the number of mosquitoes that you observe today in these regions are actually higher as compared to what it used to be, or the kinds of smaller insects and vectors that would be completely absent, because for them it would be very harsh conditions to live in those cold areas. They are surviving there now because the average temperatures have increased, so it has become easier for them to survive, because now there are longer durations of summer as compared to what it used to be. So that's why you would notice that all these smaller insects which are more found in the tropical areas of the country, let's say the peninsular area or the central southern, eastern and western parts of the country, they are now also being found in the Himalayan areas, where they would traditionally be completely absent from. So those kind of scenarios have been increasing. That, for example, let's say if you take Dehradun's example of a couple of months back, the number of cases of dengue all of a sudden in Dehradun was very high. Now, these are not situations that Dehradun would have seen 20 years back, but now it's happening. It's, yes, also because of rapid urbanization, and urbanization has led to all these kind of issues and has been aggravating and adding to all these problems. So that's why we need to understand how all these things would also have an impact. Then apart from that, we'll see that obviously as we discussed, that the extreme weather conditions will keep on rising, and that will also lead to a lot of health related issues and create a lot of problems. Then apart from that, when it comes to mental health also, we need to understand that how exactly even mental health issues would also start to rise, because in these kind of scenarios what we might see is that a lot of these diseases that we have, like even kidney injuries and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, all these kind of diseases would start to rise in number. At the same time, we'll see that the climate related stress, all right, climate related stress would also lead to increase in the number of even depression cases. All right, it will lead to an increase in number of depression cases, and at the same time, when we talk about PTSDs or post traumatic stress disorders, these kind of situations also would start to increase. So we'll see that there are not only physical health problems but also mental health problems that may start rising because of that. And then after that, when it comes to urbanization and health, we'll see that rapid and unplanned urbanization in India is also going to add to these kind of problems, and it will help, it will basically increase the impact of climate change on health situations in the country. So we need efforts, right? We need mitigation and adaptive efforts, so that we can ensure that all the direct and indirect pathways that we discussed, they can be taken into account and they can be addressed in the country. So there are things that we can do to ensure that these things do not become a big challenge for India. So there are actions that we'll have to take. We'll have to first and foremost research on these kind of areas, understand what the problems are, and then start working on those problems. And for this, the very first step is going to be research, is going to be study, is going to be the impact of climate change on health potentially and what's already happening. So we'll have to start collecting all the data. We'll start to have a research done on that area, so that we can start preparing our mitigation strategies. So for that, we need to understand all these, and we need not only a basic research or a study, but we need a policy level change to come in here, right? We need to, so that's why we are saying that we need a multi-level action here, where we have to talk about how at center, state and local government levels all these things can change. At the same time, how policies can be different in a manner that it can take into account all the impact that climate change can have on health situation in India. So overall, when it comes to health, just understand that there are a lot of ways in which climate change can lead to a lot of health related issues. So when it comes to health related issues, we see that there are a lot of these things that can happen. So for example, it can lead to heart related issues. It can lead to heart related issues. We have seen that, for example, let's say heat stroke, all right, something like a heat stroke can actually become a possibility. The number of cases of heat stroke that will start to rise, and we'll see that it will not only rise, but we know that all these are potentially life threatening. Even heat exhaustion can be life threatening. So heat stroke and heat exhaustion can be those two major issues that we might see here. So heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Now, when it comes to heat stroke and heat exhaustion levels, we see that already there are numbers that have been increasing. So for example, WHO has given an estimate. Now according to WHO, the estimates that WHO has given, there will be approximately more than 2.5 lakh cases of heat strokes every year by the year 2050. That by the year or between 2030 to 50, we'll see that there will be a burden of at least 2.5 lakh deaths that will happen only because of heat stroke, as per the data that has been given by the WHO. Similarly, there will be a rise in vector-borne diseases. Vector meaning carrier. Carriers meaning like mosquitoes, for example, let's say malaria or dengue or chikungunya, etc. All these can be counted as vector-borne diseases, where a carrier like mosquito or a house fly or a cockroach, etc. can become a carrier of the disease. So number of cases of carrier vector-borne diseases will also start to rise. So that's why something like malaria and dengue, the numbers will be higher as compared to what we see today. And already what we know is that their numbers also have been rising. So for example, let's say just if we consider dengue, all right, if we just consider dengue, and again I'm just quoting the WHO report of 2019, where there were 4 million cases. There were 4 million cases of dengue in just 1 year. 4 million cases, 40 lakh cases of dengue in just 1 year. And it is not only about some kind of normal issues or it was because of health infrastructure, etc. Climate change actually plays a big role in these kind of scenarios. Similarly, we also have to understand all the food and waterborne diseases that will also happen, because there will be a change in precipitation pattern also, correct? There will be a change in precipitation pattern because the temperatures would change, and that's why it would also affect the safety of food and water. So climate change will lead to, so basically what happens is that precipitation levels will change. Precipitation, or not levels, rather patterns. Precipitation pattern would change. And this leads to all these kind of issues with us. Similarly, we'll see that there will be a rise in respiratory problems also, and this also owes to air pollution, correct? This also owes to air pollution, because the pollutants that you have, a big part of the pollutants are also the ones that can lead to respiratory diseases. So that's why we'll see that this also will start to rise. So something like asthma cases will start to rise, and that also we'll see. Then extreme weather events, we know that there will be a lot of extreme weather events, and this will lead to a lot of accidents, injuries, mental health issues, and all these kind of problems. So that also will be a big challenge. And we again, with regards to the extreme weather events also, we know that there are so many problems that we have been facing. The number of these cases of extreme weather events have been rising in the last few years. Then it can also lead to malnutrition, because we might see that there will be a disruption in the food production, correct? Disruption in the food production owing to the changes in the climate patterns and the rainfall patterns, and the seasonalities would start to change, and that would lead to reduction in the food production capacity, and hence also lead to malnutrition, especially in the poorer countries. So malnutrition, basically what happens here is that there will be change in weather and precipitation patterns. And thus food production would decrease. Food production would decrease. So in this manner we see that there will be all these issues which we would see. Then obviously we discussed about the mental health issues also, that it can lead to a lot of stress, sometimes trauma, sometimes depression. All these scenarios will also become a reality. Then the disease, the infectious disease would spread more, because they are now going to get a conducive environment for living easily, surviving easily, and hence we'll see that their areas would expand, their areas of influence will start to expand. So that will also become a challenge. Then it will also lead to a severe water scarcity, and we'll see that these kind of issues like access to clean water for drinking and sanitation purposes, that will start to decrease even further. The extreme drought events will decrease further, and we'll discuss that later also. And you'll see that there are all these impacts that we might have. Then especially the impact on the vulnerable populations. We'll see that especially the elderly, the children, the low income group people, they will be the ones to suffer even more, because they might not have the kind of access that the rich would have. So that's why for them it might become an even more difficult scenario. People who are not let's say normally healthy, for them the situations are even worse. So that's why the vulnerable groups of people, either financially vulnerable or health wise vulnerable, we'll see that they will be at the receiving end even more as compared to anyone else. So that also will be a big challenge. So there can be disruption of healthcare systems altogether, and ultimately also something related to the migration and the conflicts, because we know that there will be climate related migrations. And forget about will be, you just go and take the case study of Bangladesh, just read on it, that what has already have been happening in Bangladesh, that people already have been moving away from the sea, because there has been a significant water rise that they already have been witnessing. So forget about the future and what would happen in the future, you just go and read upon Bangladesh and what's happening with Bangladesh already. So you'll see that there are all these issues that it will increase even further. There will be clashes, there will be health related issues, and there are so many problems that something like this could lead to. So I know I'm being very negative while discussing all this, but these are the potential problems that we are looking at. So we cannot just become an ostrich today and just put our head in the sand, think that everything is fine. It's not. Everyone will have to take a step, whether at an individual level or at the policy level, but it needs to happen. Now coming to the next topic, and this is about in page number 9, India, Japan converge in Southeast Asia. Now this article is basically about Philippines, and what we are looking at with regards to Philippines, and how Philippines has been struggling because of its issues and conflicts with China. That with regards to the problems that it has with China, how those problems are leading to a lot of issues for them. And now they have started looking towards countries like India, Japan, and even US, so that they can balance the influence of China. So that's why this basically is what this topic is, or this article is about. This article basically has been talking about how exactly we see all these problems between Philippines and China, and how they have been trying to now counter China with their you can say coming closer to countries like India and Japan. Now when it comes to the context, that's why the context here is that they want to shift their focus away from the Chinese led infrastructure projects, and instead now they are looking towards Japan in India for development assistance and security partnerships. So that is the context of this question. Now, the entire problem, especially when it comes between China and Philippines, it starts from this area, what we popularly know as the South China Sea, or as Philippines would say, West Philippines Sea, right? So this West Philippines Sea or the South China Sea is the problem, because if you look at all these lines that have been marked in this particular diagram, so for example, this red line that you have, the red line is the part that the Chinese claim. So according to China, this entire sea belongs to China, as you can see here, that they are claiming a big part of it, but at the same time, they are not the only ones who are claiming. So for example, Malaysia also claims a part which comes under the influence, or which China also is claiming. Then Vietnam also has been claiming a big part of it, and that also comes under the influence of China, or under the, not the influence rather, but the areas that are being seen by China, or what China wants to control. And same with Vietnam, or Brunei, or even Philippines. So even between Philippines, as you can see, that there is a big chunk of area which you can say is a dispute between China and Philippines, right? A big area which is a dispute between China and Philippines, and this is the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem between Philippines and China, and we know the kinds of expansionary policies that Chinese have, because of which they have been claiming everything. I mean, we also know that they have been claiming parts of India. They already have captured a lot of areas of, I mean, we know that Tibet already is completely under Chinese control, and we know that on the eastern front also they have all the countries that they have been controlling, and they want South China Sea also. So for China, the entire world is supposed to be China, and they don't want anything to be beyond China. But unfortunately, that doesn't work for everyone. Why would we cede our land? Why would they cede their waters? Nobody would want that. So that's why we see that there are all these issues that often arise between China and all the neighboring countries, whether on land or in the sea. So that is where we see that the conflict between China and Philippines also comes in. Now, when it comes to what exactly this article has been talking about, this article basically says, talks about how now Philippines is looking towards India and Japan, so that whatever they are not able to get with China, or wherever they have conflicts with China, they can at least balance it out, and they can show to China also that how exactly the situations, they can control the situations, or what exactly they want, and how they can also try to balance it out. So that's where that is basically how we are looking here, that the new the Philippines leadership, they don't want influence of China, and hence they have started looking at this particular perspective. Now overall, when it comes to Philippines and the kind of issues that they have between China, I mean with China, first and foremost, we do know that there are these territorial disputes, and this is obviously because of the South China Sea. So it is because of that, we know that. But at the same time, there have been issues. So if I go back to this, so there have been these islands which always have been a problem between China and Philippines. So for example, we have the Spratly Islands. They always have been under a situation, always have been under controversy, and at the same time, the Scarborough Shoal Islands, they also have been under problem. And we saw that in, especially with regards to this, we saw that in 2012, if you have gone, I mean, if you know the historic context to it, in 2012 there was a standoff that happened between China and Philippines, and because of that, what we see is that ultimately, basically China had reached here, and Philippines did not like it, and that's why it led to a situation between them. And China at that point of time had gotten an effective control of these areas, and ever since then, Philippines have been also has been going to all the international fora also, and they have been trying to bring up these issues and internationally too. So that has been one issue that we have seen. Apart from that, with regards to The Spratly Islands also, we have seen that there have been activities where all these situations have already aligned. So for example, in these kind of situations, when, because as I told you that Philippines went international and said that okay, this is something that belongs to Philippines and China should not try to gain control over it, and they had gone international. And in 2016, it was ruled in the international tribunal that we have in Hague. They actually had ruled in favor of Philippines, but China being China, China just rejected it and said that no, we are not going to move away from there, and we are not going to follow whatever judgments have been given by the international tribunal. So that's why ultimately from there also, from that perspective also, it did not solve the problem. So that's why there have been these issues. So largest problem is obviously the territorial disputes that they have. Apart from that, we see that there have been other issues also, that for example, what we just discussed, that in 2013 they had went international, and in 2016 it came in their favor also, but because China rejected it, still is, you can say, in a standoff mode, and still the situation has not cleared the way it should have in favor of Philippines, although international ruling was in favor of Philippines. Then after that, there are maritime security and resource extraction related issues as well, because what we know is that the presence of Chinese vessels that is there in all these areas, especially in the controversial waters, that also leads to a lot of issues and lot of security concerns, and for countries like Philippines, because what they see is that there have been even cases of harassment of the Philippines nationals by the Chinese in these kind of waters. So there have been all these kind of problems that they have. Apart from that, when it comes to South China Sea is also controversial because of its resources. The resources that you have there, the underwater resources, plus the possibility of oil and gas exploration. For all these issues also, we see that resource extraction becomes a big problem. Resource extraction also becomes a big problem. So that's why we see that there are all these situations, especially with regards to the exploration of oil and natural gas, mainly because of oil and natural gas. So that's why we see that this also is a problem. Then apart from that, the military buildup that has been happening in this region, because what we also have witnessed is that China has been also constructing artificial islands. You might have come across it somewhere. Also has been building artificial islands. Now these artificial islands are just, you can say, in a manner, military facilities for them. These are just a way in which they want to increase their influence in the sea. That they keep doing the construction, everyone else keeps disputing it, everyone keeps raising their voices against it, but they keep on constructing and they keep on claiming the parts of that area by doing that. So we see that there are all these issues that have happened, and that's why we saw that now Philippines also has resorted to military exercises, etc., which are happening in these areas. Military exercises with US, military exercises with Japan, and all these things also they have been doing. So that's why we see that there are all these issues that we see between China and Philippines, because of which Philippines wants to have other strategic partners, and this is where balancing these issues with the help of India and Japan is what they have been trying. That first and foremost, having stronger ties with countries like India or countries like Japan also means that they are not dependent on one country economically, or let's say for the resources or whatever it is. They would also have the help of all these other countries also. So that's why there is a kind of diversification of partnership that happens here. Similarly, to balance China's influence, this becomes very, very crucial, because we know that especially if the economic activities of the region are completely controlled by China, then in that case countries like Philippines will have no say. But when there are other players also which come in the same region, then economic activities also will get distributed, and that will help in balancing China's influence. So that's another important part that we need to understand here. And then apart from that, they'll be also looking for economic assistance and investment, because in both the cases, when it comes to improving upon the infrastructure or improving upon the economic activities, they'll always be very, very helpful here. Then apart from that, they'll also lead to security cooperation. So for example, we discussed about the joint military exercises that they are conducting with countries like Japan, US, etc. So there it helps. Then they will be able to get better diplomatic support, right? Because until now they haven't had a lot of voices in their favor, so they would need stronger presence or stronger economies or stronger political presence in these kind of situation, and that will help in them gaining better diplomatic support in these kind of areas. So, or whenever there are any controversies, or if there are any legal battles between Philippines and China, they might be able to get some support from countries like India and Japan. And then it would also help in them getting, or Philippines getting, a lot of regional initiatives also. They can become a part of a lot of regional initiatives. So for example, let's say if you think of Quad, right? If you think of Quad, so where you have countries like India, Japan, US and Australia. So if they can get the help from Quad, or if let's say they can get the help from other influences that we have in these kind of areas, it will also help a lot in getting them stronger influence in the Indo Pacific region. So in all these cases, we'll see that it will work very well, or it may potentially work very well for a country like Philippines if they can get this support from countries like India and Japan. Now coming to another report that came out, and this is the OECD report on climate finance. Now when it comes to this the OECD report, this report basically what it does is, or if you understand this in the context of the same, because there are two things that I want to take together, that the OECD report was published and the UN also talking about that we are racing well past the warming limits. So these two things together will try to understand that how exactly are we looking at it. So when it comes to the OECD report, the OECD report basically recently came out, where it is highlighting the failure of the economically developed countries to fulfill their promise of jointly mobilizing $100 billion annually for climate change mitigation and adaptation needs. And all the deadlines and all the targets that these countries had, they are being missed. These deadlines are being missed, and there are a lot of other issues that they also have been that they have highlighted. So when, for example, when it comes to the climate finance, for the first thing that they have highlighted obviously is the problem with regards to the kind of problems that we have seen. So first and foremost, that the countries have failed in mobilizing this kind of a target, or this kind of money that they needed to do. Now apart from this, one thing that also matters in this scenario is that when it comes to this OECD report, it does highlight the fact that the countries have not been able to mobilize this money, but at the same time, one more thing that has been highlighted is that even if the money has been mobilized, even then a lot of money that they have mobilized or they have used as in climate financing, they actually have taken loans and done that. So that also does not reflect very well about what they exactly should have done. Because just imagine that, let's say you are somebody who is very wealthy, all right, you are somebody who has, let's say, crores of rupees, and I asked you that, okay, please use 1 lakh rupees and give it to the poor people, or maybe donate it to an NGO, just 1 lakh out of the crores that you have. Now what you do is, you go to a bank, you take a loan of rupees 1 lakh and you give it to the poor. It did not help anyone, correct? It did not help anyone, because you did not actually do your part in making that change happen, or the social change perhaps that I was expecting out of you. So that did not happen, and something similar is being done by the richer economies. That even if climate financing is being done by them, the climate financing is being done in a manner where they have also taken a significant amount of loan in taking or in even making these efforts. So that is where the things become very problematic, because they are taking loans and doing this, which is not at all expected. At the same time, what also comes into the picture here in this particular scenario is that the OECD report does talk about the fact that this is what the problem is. They have been able to mobilize, they have been able to mobilize, I think, somewhere around 89.6 billion in 2021. And this is something that decreased by 14%. It decreased by 14% as compared to the previous numbers. At the same time, one more thing that they have shed light on has been the problem with regards to where this money is coming from. That where they are saying that this money also, whatever is coming here also there are loans that are being taken. There are loans that are being taken, and a significant part of it actually is coming from the loans that they have taken, which is also not good in this particular scenario. So they are related to, they have taken loans for it. Now there is one also very very important fact that we need to understand when it comes to a topic like this, that when we say climate finance, this also is a term which is a very casually used term. There is no specific definition that has been given officially by the world, or let's say UN or any other body, that what do we even mean by climate finance, what do you count under climate finance and what you don't count under climate finance. Because when analysis of the reports have been done, where we have seen that a lot of money that actually has gone as climate finance was not actually climate finance, but it was something random where you just found something that could be linked to climate and you are saying that it is related to climate finance. So this is also something which is a big challenge altogether, because the countries have kept it vague and they have not even tried to give a proper definition to what climate finance even could be. So that's why this becomes a very big challenge altogether, because there is no agreed upon common definition of what climate finance means. And that also becomes a big problem, because then the investments can happen anywhere and you can count it as climate finance, trying to just link it with climate change in one way or the other. So that is also something that they have raised in this particular scenario, that this can be a big challenge, and especially for bigger countries, this is some where they would have to address these kind of topics. And in the context of the upcoming climate conference that is supposed to happen in a week's time, they need to understand and they need to come out with proper definitions. So for example, one thing that we noticed was that they said that okay, $100 billion have to be given for climate finance. Now first and foremost, why 100 billion? It looked like just it was a random figure which looks like a good figure, and they came out with a figure. So there was no research that okay, this is why we need $100 billion investment in climate financing, and this is where this 100 billion should go. That there is a reason, there is a logic that we arrived at this number, that is 100 billion. So that's where this becomes a big challenge for everyone to understand, that unless you have a clear roadmap, unless you have a clear path to how you are going to use these $100 billion, you cannot really come to a conclusion where how exactly you can use it. So for example, even in there are cases where we have seen that construction of a hotel or construction of a resort also has been counted under climate finance, because of the words like sustainability and all these things being used there while the construction happened. So even that kind of money that was supposed to be meant for climate finance has been used for construction of resorts, or even in production of chocolate, etc., has been counted under climate finance. So we have seen that there are all these kind of issues that we have seen with climate financing. Now apart from that, one more thing that we are discussing here is regarding the key warning with regards to what's happening, and something that we discussed in our first topic also, that overall we see that there are changes that we are looking at, and at an alarming rate all these changes are happening, and this would need a very important step from our end to start working as quickly as possible. Now, when we talk about, so one thing that needs to be focused here upon is what exactly happens when the climate change happens, and we discussed about all the health impacts etc that it can have. But what's the difference that when we are saying that there is 1.5 degree warming of the globe, the average warming of the globe, versus when we are saying that there is a 3 degrees Celsius warming of the globe? So in that particular scenario, what kind of change comes in when it comes to these scenarios? Now, so we need to understand what's the basic difference between 1.5 degrees Celsius versus 3 degrees Celsius. Now, overall, if you look at this, the most important thing with regards to understanding of all these areas is with regards to what happens with water. Now, in case of, if we are only looking at water and what will happen with water, we understand that there are a lot of issues which will happen with water. And as you increase the temperature, if the global rise in temperature is beyond 8%, beyond 2 degrees Celsius, then 8% of the global population will be looking at water shortage. By 3 degrees Celsius, almost half of the Himalayan high mountain glaciers will be completely lost. And 4 degrees Celsius is an unimaginable situation for us. But right now the problem is that we actually are looking at a scenario where this might become a problem, that once we reach, let's say, something like a 3 degrees Celsius, the extreme weather, for example, the extreme weather conditions. So what happens at 3 degrees Celsius? First and foremost, the extreme weather events increase a lot more. Alright, extreme weather events increase a lot more. Then after that, the sea level rise. There will be a significant sea level rise. And this will be detrimental for a lot of island nations, a lot of, especially the Pacific island nations, the micronation countries. You'll see that actually there will be islands or countries that will be lost forever if it happens. For example, if you just want to read upon it, just read about Tuvalu. Read about what will happen to the island nation of Tuvalu. So countries like these will be lost. Other countries, there will be significant erosion of their coastal lands, and that's where the population will have to move away. And if you look at the population data of the world, you'll find that a huge population of the world lives in the coastline, lives in the coastal areas, and they'll all have to start moving away from the coasts. So that will become a significant problem. Then after that, we'll see that there will be a major problem with the ecosystems as well, that a lot of ecosystems will be lost. A lot of ecosystems which are fragile ecosystems, they will also be lost. So a lot of fragile ecosystems will be lost. A lot of, for example, coral reefs. The coral reefs will be gone by the time this kind of climate change happens. So the kind of natural barrier that they create will also be gone with them. So we'll see that there will be all these issues. There will be a lot of issues with agriculture and food safety. Agriculture and food safety also will face a lot of issues. Then at the same time, we'll see that we discussed about how it will have an impact on human health too. Right? It will have a huge impact on human health. And apart from that, obviously there will be economic, political and social impact of these kind of events as well. So we need to understand all these problems. And so there are so many different issues that we are looking at which might happen because of these kind of scenarios. Now, one more topic that we have here is with regards to coal. Now, this particular topic or this article, it basically talks about coal and what role coal is going to play in our infrastructure, and how exactly do we need to manage coal, what do we need to do with coal, because right now we see that there is no getting away from coal in the coming years or in the very short term future. So we need to have a long term strategy of what we need to do and where we are right now, and how exactly do we need to look at all these scenarios. So for example, when it comes to so that's why this is basically the context that we are talking about, how low carbon energy sources, transitioning to low carbon energy sources, we need coal as a vital part of the energy mix, and then only we'll be able to survive. And that's why we need to explore various strategies to balance the energy that we get from environmentally friendly sources versus something like coal. Now, when it comes to the understanding of coal, just understand in the context of India that where we are right now. So when we look at our requirements, the peak requirement that we had very recently, last month itself, was I think 234 gigawatts. By 2030, our peak requirements is supposed to rise up to 335 gigawatts. So up to 335 gigawatts, I think, is the estimate as per some reports, that this would be our peak requirement. All right. Now, this will be our peak energy or electricity requirement. So this is 2023 and this is 2030. So this is our peak energy requirement. Now, out of this, what we want is, you at the same time you might also know that we want that up to 500 gigawatt of installed capacity is what we are looking at by 2030. Correct? 500 gigawatt of installed capacity of renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources, or non-coal, non-petroleum sources to be exact. So we want 500 gigawatt. Now, out of which we know that 335 gigawatt will be our peak requirement. So now we have to see how much of it will be provided by coal, because we want that not more than 50%. Our energy requirements should not be dependent on more than 50% of non-renewable sources. So 50% of it comes from here. It means that 175 gigawatt will have to come from here. So we have to see how much of installed capacity we need so that our actual production can be up to 175 gigawatts, so that the rest can be handled by coal. So we will have to look at a strategy in this manner, that how can we slowly and steadily decrease our coal requirements. So, but right now what we see is that 2022 data, if we see, 80% of the world's energy with coal is coming from coal or gas, contributing to 30, 27 and 23%. Then at the same time, what we have seen is that overall, when it comes to the energy requirements, we understand that energy requirements of the country are largely dependent on coal. That 96% of the coal requirements are actually being met domestically, and that's why we see that the projections are that our capacity of TPP, meaning thermal power plant, our thermal power plant capacity will reach up to 259 to 262 gigawatts. So we'll have sufficient amount of energy, potential that we can cater to with the help of coal. Now, when it comes to coal, what we need to understand is that there are a lot of issues that we are facing with coal altogether. Now, when it comes to these issues, first and foremost, the issue is that when we look at the coal that we have in India, we largely are dependent on the bituminous coal. And this bituminous coal, basically, the Indian bituminous coal has 35 to 50% impurities. So that's why the ash that they produce, the ash content is high. ash content is on the higher side, and we need to look at certain methods that can help us in reducing this ash content from the coal that we are using. Then at the same time, it also talks about the flue gas desulfurizers and the emission norms, that how exactly we can retrofit FTGs in the thermal power plants, and also at the same time try that with the help of these methods we are able to reduce some amount of coal dependence or some amount of coal wastage as well, you can say, in a manner in the country. So in this particular scenario it talks about it. Now flue gas desulfurization is a method, or flue gas desulfurizers are actually required to reduce sulfur dioxide amount, reduce sulfur dioxide emissions from the thermal power plants. So that's why these are required for that, and we see that they can actually be used in a much better manner, so that we can actually improve upon the quality of coal and reduce the emissions that are happening there. Then at the same time it also talks about how we can use other advanced technologies, like for example ultra supercritical technology or integrated gasification combined cycle. So these are you can say technologies that help us in improving the efficiency, improving energy efficiency or energy production efficiency of coal. And that's why you'll also see that the government of India also has been allocating a lot of money, a lot of funds to these kind of methods, so that India can use them in the coming future. Then after that, so ultimately when it comes to the future of coal in India, we need to understand how exactly the transition will happen and what is our strategy. And strategy will purely be based on these numbers, our requirements, our peak requirements, not only the average requirements. We need to understand the peak requirements, because let's say the average requirement is around 200 gigawatt, but the peak requirement is going to 234 gigawatt. So you cannot just cater to the average requirement in a given year. What the peak requirement on any given day in the year was, that becomes very, very crucial. Now coming to some of the smaller articles that we have here. First one here is the SATHEE portal that has been floated by the government of India. Now this SATHEE portal is something that will also be very, very helpful in helping students prepare for free, giving them materials, giving them online platforms where they can prepare for free, and especially at the levels of their schools and the competitive examinations like JEE and NEET. In these kind of situations they can get the help from here. So that's why even the refresher courses from class 9 to 10th will be 12th will be provided. Board examination help will be provided. Various kinds of resources that can help them in these situations. We'll see that. So what is SATHEE? SATHEE is self-assessment test and help for entrance exams. So this is what the full form is, and this is something that Ministry of Education and IIT Kanpur, they have come together and they actually have created this online platform where they'll have teachers who will come from various backgrounds, like even the IIT professors will also take classes, and they'll also provide the free resources to the people who need them. So these are supposed to be some of the features of this SATHEE app or the SATHEE platform rather. The preparation material for entrance examination including JEE and NEET, then video solutions in regional languages also for the entrance examinations. Then after that, preparation ideas or strategies will also be shared with the students, and also the stories of achievements and struggles of the students who are here. And there are motivational sessions and solve with me kind of sessions also that will be a part of the feature list that we have with the SATHEE portal. So we see that SATHEE portal from this perspective becomes very, very crucial in this particular segment. Then one more article is about inflation and the fact that it still remains a key risk to growth, and this is something that has been cautioned by the finance ministry. So they had reported that inflationary pressures have still although they have eased because of lot of internal and external factors, but at the same time we see that there are still things that need to be done, and then only there are things that we have to be aware of and we have to caution against, so that these do not become a big challenge for us. So that's why, so for example, in this scenario they highlighted that how exactly the inflationary pressures have eased, right? In the inflationary pressures have eased, but at the same time what we see is that there are a lot of external factors also which are leading to this kind of a situation. And the fiscal deficit target that we have, that 5.9% of GDP fiscal target, deficit target that we are on track to meet it as well, is what it has been reported in this particular scenario. Now, one thing that has been noted here is that the global oil prices have been dropping, and because of that there is a kind of ease of pressure also that has happened internationally as well, and it has also helped India and the government of India to get to a roadmap of these targets. At the same time, the food production in the last few months have been good. Because of that, the farm income has been good, the rural economy has been helped because of that, and this also helps in improving upon the demand. It improves upon the aggregate demand in the economy, and that is good for the domestic economy. If you remember, yesterday we had a discussion on aggregate demand. If you want to go into the details of what it means, please refer to the first article that we had discussed in yesterday's discussion. So it basically talks about that, and how also the festive season also being there in the last couple of months also has helped in increasing the spending of the people, and that's why created a demand in the economy altogether. So that has helped in all these positive values that they have created. And then lastly, one topic about cloud seeding, and this is something that has been reported on page number 4. Now what basically is being suggested is that to tackle the problem of air pollution and dust in Mumbai, the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, he has suggested that cloud seeding might be used. We might want to use cloud seeding, and with the help of cloud seeding we might want to tackle these problems. Recently, you might remember that just a few days back, this is also something that was being suggested for Delhi. It was supposed to happen in these days only, November 20th to 22nd, but there were other weather pattern changes because of which it did not happen. So this is basically what has been said by the Chief Minister Eknath Shinde. He said that they can use cloud seeding if required to control the dust and air pollution. So when it comes to cloud seeding, just understand in very basic terms what we mean by cloud seeding. So when it comes to cloud seeding is where you use some kind of mechanism. Either we use airplanes or we use ground-based generators. So either airplanes or ground-based generators will be used for cloud seeding. Now when it comes to cloud seeding, this is basically, you can say in a manner, we try to modify the weather with the help of cloud seeding. So it is a method that helps us in modifying the weather. It helps us in modifying the weather, and it basically can change the amount or type of precipitation, right? So either to increase or decrease precipitation, or to change the type of precipitation. For example, even to control hailstorms, many a times we use cloud seeding so that hailstorms can be converted to normal precipitation. So all these things can be used for cloud seeding. So any kind of modification, remember, any kind of modification in the different types or the amount of precipitation will be called as cloud seeding. Now with cloud seeding, that's why we see that there are a lot of benefits that we can actually manage. So whether it is about water resource management or agricultural benefits, especially for the drought hit areas, and improving upon precipitation, also something like what we have used in Solapur in Maharashtra. So we see that all these can also be done. At the same time, it will also help us in reducing the impact of drought. It can help us in also controlling forest fires. We see that snowpack augmentation, that is basically, you can say, in the mountainous regions is used, and largely you will see that in the US this is a method that they use to improve the quantity of snow. And then even, as I told you, hailstorm suppression and fog dissipation. So fog dissipation or dust dissipation is what we want here in India, or whether when it comes to Mumbai. So there are all these things. So just know in one line that what can happen, and this is something that there was the data that was published for the Solapur city when it was tried in India a few years back. So that's why we know that it can work if used correctly, but we still need to see how impactful it can be. Right. So these were the articles that we had. There were a lot of articles that we had today, but all of these articles were very essential, very important articles, and they needed good discussion for your examination. Now let's look at the mains questions that we have. So 2 mains questions, something that we have analyzed, something that we have discussed. I hope that you take your own initiative and you also write answers to these questions. Try writing it on the basis of all the discussions that we have done today. It will really help you in getting to understand all these issues at depth, and also how you can by yourself also analyze all these topics. So with that, we end the session for today. Thank you very much for being here in the session. I know it has been a little longer session than useful, but eventually it is going to be only and only helpful for you. So fine, please go back, if possible revise it also. Please subscribe to our channel, please like the video, please share it with your friends and any aspirant with you who are preparing for this examination. It will also help and benefit all of them. Thank you very much.